The Chinese Navy has dedicated the last decade to a single goal: to shake up and change the balance of power in the Western Pacific. Billions of dollars have been spent on Beijing's strategic ambition. The steel pinnacle of this massive investment was Beijing's new fleet of aircraft carriers, the pride of the nation, especially its newest and most advanced platform, the CNS Fujian. These massive ships were seen as central to China's plan to intimidate U.S. allies like the Philippines and turn the South China Sea from international waters into its own private lake. A symbol of power, a challenge itself. However, in late September 2025, this multi-billion-dollar pride was shaken by a single photograph. A massive 170-meter-long Ohio-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine belonging to the U.S. Navy calmly surfaced right in the middle of the Chinese fleet's operational area in Subic Bay, Philippines, at the gateway to the South China Sea. This was no ordinary submarine. It was an SSGN platform known as the Aircraft Carrier Killer, carrying 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. The arrival of the USS Ohio was not a courtesy visit, but a cold display of 154 barrels aimed at Beijing's most valuable asset. This development could mean the shattering of the illusion of control in China's backyard. For military planners at the headquarters of the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, in Beijing, this is precisely one of the most frightening scenarios. What turns this event into a technological nightmare is not just the platform itself surfacing, but the magnitude of the asymmetric threat it represents. To better understand the impact of the USS Ohio, which is mobilizing the Pacific Axis led by China, we must take a closer look at what this platform is. The submarine in question is one of 4 converted Ohio-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. These submarines were designed during the Cold War for a single purpose: to carry 24 Trident intercontinental ballistic missiles to launch a nuclear apocalypse against the Soviet Union. They were doomsday weapons. When the Cold War ended, these massive and silent platforms were converted into the most lethal conventional weapons in the U.S. Navy's arsenal. The centerpiece of the conversion was those massive ballistic missile tubes. 22 of the 24 tubes were fitted with special canisters called multiple all-up round canisters, MASS-E, which contain 7 launch tubes each. Simple math: 22 tubes times 7 missiles equals a total of 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Let's put this number into context. The U.S. Navy's most modern Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has a total missile capacity of approximately 90 to 96 silos, which are divided between air defense, anti-ballistic, and attack missiles. A single Ohio-class SSGN carries the total attack power of approximately 2 fully equipped destroyers on a single platform. The main feature of this platform is its invisibility. The nuclear reactors of these submarines allow them to remain underwater for months. Their acoustic signatures, the sounds they make in the depths of the ocean, are designed to be extremely difficult to detect with the current sonar technology possessed by the Chinese Navy. This means that an SSGN can silently cruise for weeks, even months, beneath Chinese fleets along the travel route of the CNS Fujian aircraft carrier, just off the main naval base on Hainan Island. That's why surfacing carries the nature of a deliberate and ruthless diplomatic message rather than a military necessity. The message is, we were here long before you saw us. We know where you are, we know where you are going, and we are watching you. This scenario is a saturation attack nightmare for the Chinese Navy. An aircraft carrier battle group typically consists of an aircraft carrier such as the Fujian, accompanied by 4 to 6 Type 052D destroyers and Type 054A frigates. The role of these escort ships is to create a multi-layered air defense umbrella, such as HHQ-9 long-range missiles, to protect the aircraft carrier. However, this defense umbrella is effective against predictable threats coming from a single direction. The threat posed by an SSGN is entirely different. 154 Tomahawk missiles, especially the anti-ship variants, namely the maritime strike Tomahawk Block 5 when launched from underwater, can descend upon the fleet from different directions at a profile close to the sea surface and almost simultaneously. It seems quite difficult, even theoretically, for China's air defense systems to cope with 154 advanced cruise missiles arriving at the same time. The system would be overwhelmed. Radars would lock up trying to track hundreds of targets simultaneously. The number of defense missiles available for launch would be insufficient. Even just a few missiles piercing that defensive umbrella could be enough to take the CNS Fujian out of action, if not sink the multi-billion-dollar vessel. This situation could mean that China's decades of billions of dollars of investment could be trapped by a single invisible platform. The U.S. has demonstrated how it can hunt down China's most expensive asset with an asymmetric killer. Washington's strategic chess move is not an isolated incident or a momentary provocation. It is the culmination of a period in which the balance of power in the Pacific is being reset and tensions are rapidly escalating. The appearance of this SSGN in Subic Bay is part of a series of moves demonstrating how the U.S. is accelerating its military buildup in the region in response to China's increasing aggression. The primary trigger for this move is Beijing's increasing harassment in the South China Sea based on its illegitimate claim known as the Nine-Dash Line. The Philippines, with which the U.S. has a defense pact, has become a primary target of this harassment. In recent months, Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels have repeatedly engaged in dangerous actions against Philippine Coast Guard vessels and even civilian fishing boats. According to reports published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, these actions include spraying Philippine vessels with high-pressure water jets, temporarily blinding crew members with military-grade lasers, and most dangerously, ramming them. The incidents in mid-October 2025 in which Philippine vessels were damaged are seen as one of the last straws. Therefore, the arrival of the USS Ohio at Subic Bay, a former U.S. naval base in the Philippines, is not only a message to China but also a clear commitment to Manila. There will be a price to pay for aggression against our ally. The U.S.'s determination to maintain its submarine superiority in the Pacific is not limited to sending new ships. It is also investing billions of dollars in the infrastructure that will support these killers. Simultaneously, a massive expansion project is underway at the historic Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Hawaii. This $3.4 billion project involves the construction of a new dry dock to replace the old dry docks dating back to World War II, capable of servicing modern nuclear attack submarines such as the Virginia class. This investment aims to significantly enhance the U.S. Navy's submarine fleet maintenance and repair capabilities in the Pacific. This is a commitment to deploy more aircraft carrier killers to the Pacific and keep them operational for longer periods. Guam, another critical U.S. base known as the Spearhead, is also at the center of this buildup. Guam is within the direct range of China's medium-range ballistic missiles, such as the DF-26, known as the Guam Killer. In response, the U.S. is upgrading the island's air defense to an unprecedented level. Beyond the existing THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Systems, work is underway on a new integrated defense architecture called Golden Dome. These plans even include the deployment of futuristic technologies such as railguns and electromagnetic cannons to counter China's hypersonic missiles and saturation attacks. This shows that the U.S. is prepared to use every technological advantage to protect its presence in the region. Furthermore, the shadow of nuclear deterrence always looms over these conventional moves. The U.S. regularly tests its nuclear capabilities to reinforce its strategic message. Recent tests of a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile launched from California and a Trident II ballistic missile launched from a submarine in the Atlantic served as reminders of this deterrence. These tests can be read as a direct response to China's rapid expansion of its own nuclear arsenal. When all these pieces come together, the Ohio submarine surfacing in the South China Sea is merely the most visible lightning bolt of a major geopolitical storm. Meanwhile, the immediate ripple effects of the USS Ohio surfacing in Subic Bay may have created a sense of military humiliation in Beijing corridors. This incident directly targets the narrative of the region's new ruler that the Chinese Communist Party has been building for years. The CCP had been propagating to its own people and the world that the People's Liberation Army Navy was now a force capable of deterring, even defeating, the U.S. Navy in the Western Pacific. Aircraft carriers like the CNS Fujian were the shining poster children of this propaganda. However, this single frame of photography revealed a painful truth contrary to the glossy images of Chinese state media. A single invisible platform from the U.S. could still threaten China's most expensive investments. It was a jarring moment that showed just how hollow the propaganda could be. Militarily, this move may have suddenly and forcibly pushed the Chinese Navy into defense mode. The Chinese fleet, which had been flexing its muscles in the South China Sea with the Fujian, harassing neighbors like the Philippines, may have suddenly realized it had become the prey. Now, planners and commanders must consider whether there are other SSGNs silently listening to them and targeting them beneath the ocean. This situation has the potential to directly undermine two of China's most critical strategic objectives, namely the invasion of Taiwan and the blockade of the Philippines. Any amphibious operation aimed at invading Taiwan would require the Chinese Navy to pile massive, slow-landing ships carrying tens of thousands of troops, tanks, and equipment into the Taiwan Strait. These ships are perfect targets for an SSGN's 154 Tomahawk missiles. The U.S. demonstrating this capability in the region fundamentally changes the cost-benefit analysis of Beijing's invasion plans. They now have to add this question to the top of every military plan: what about the invisible SSGNs? This question can turn an invasion attempt from a military gamble into strategic suicide. The same applies to the Philippines. China's attempt to impose a naval blockade to punish the Philippines would require it to keep its ships on predictable routes. The presence of the USS Ohio demonstrates that such a blockade could be a death trap for Chinese ships. This psychological blow limits China's military options and forces the Beijing administration to think twice before taking more aggressive steps. The U.S. move saw through China's bluff and put 154 missiles on the table in response. This is a strategic move that could paralyze Beijing's calculations. This incident has reignited a long-standing debate among military analysts. Could the Chinese army, especially its navy, be a paper tiger? The Chinese People's Liberation Army has not engaged in a large-scale modern war since the Korean War. The country's navy lacks experience in high-intensity naval warfare, except for small-scale naval clashes against Vietnam in the 1970s and 80s. The Chinese Navy, or plan, may have become the world's largest navy on paper. They may have surpassed the U.S. in terms of the number of ships. However, modern naval warfare is not won by ship count alone. This war requires complex capabilities such as command and control, network-centric warfare, crew training, and, most importantly, anti-submarine warfare. This is precisely where the U.S.'s strategic chess move comes into play. Washington is playing on Beijing's weakest point, namely its anti-submarine warfare vulnerability. Expert analyses and even China's own military publications have long pointed out that the plan's anti-submarine warfare capabilities lag far behind the rest of the Navy. China's weaknesses in this area are chronic. China lacks sufficient numbers of advanced long-range maritime patrol aircraft that could rival the P-8 Poseidon. Furthermore, the sonar systems on China's surface vessels, destroyers, and frigates, particularly towed array sonars, are considered to fall short of Western standards. China's helicopter-based anti-submarine warfare capabilities are similarly limited. Some analyses even suggest that China's own nuclear submarines, such as the Type 093, are still relatively noisy and easier to detect than Western or Russian platforms. The U.S. strategy is built on this asymmetry. While China is encouraged to spend billions of dollars on surface ships like the CNS Fujian, which are difficult to defend and extremely expensive, by imitating U.S. aircraft carrier fleets. The U.S. itself focuses on much less costly, asymmetric, and effective ways to eliminate these ships, namely invisible submarine platforms. As China tries to play the U.S.'s game, the U.S. is changing the rules of the game. While China builds an expensive target on the surface of the sea, the U.S. is quietly deploying the hunter that will strike that target from beneath the sea. The surfacing of the USS Ohio is a slap in the face to Beijing, revealing this brutal strategic reality. China's multi-billion-dollar investment could be defenseless against U.S. submarine superiority, even in its own backyard. The repercussions of this move extend far beyond military headquarters and diplomatic corridors, reaching the heart of the global economy. This is not just a military show of force, but also an indirect economic strangulation maneuver. The name of the battlefield is the South China Sea, and it is one of the lifelines of world trade. According to sources such as the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, approximately 21% of global trade worth $3.4 to $4 trillion annually, and more than 37% of global oil transported by sea passes through these narrow waters. The energy and trade flows of major economies such as China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are critically dependent on this strait. The appearance of the USS Ohio in this region directly threatens the maritime component of China's largest project, the Belt and Road Initiative, and Beijing's claim to be the guarantor of regional stability. This move by the U.S. sends a clear message to international investors, shipping companies, and countries in the region. The power ensuring freedom of navigation and security in the region is Washington, not Beijing. Any disruption to stability in the region or perception of conflict sends insurance premiums soaring, alters shipping routes, and makes supply chains fragile. This scenario is a nightmare for China's export-dependent economy. More importantly, this move forces Beijing into an expensive arms race. China now realizes that it is not enough to simply build more aircraft carriers. It must also pour billions of dollars into its weakest area, namely anti-submarine warfare capabilities. This is an expenditure that must be made at a time when the Chinese economy is slowing down, is in the grip of a massive real estate crisis involving Evergrande and similar companies, and youth unemployment is at record levels. This is a strategic squeeze with the potential to trigger an internal front collapse scenario. Like the Kremlin in Ukraine, Beijing may be forced to divert its resources to foreign military adventures and defense spending rather than solving internal problems. The U.S. may be playing a long-term game aimed at economically exhausting China and destabilizing its internal stability. Ultimately, that 170-meter steel hull surfacing just off the Philippines in the South China Sea is not just a submarine. It can be seen as a symbol of how fragile Beijing's dream of Pacific dominance and illusion of regional control really is. China can build aircraft carriers worth billions of dollars and launch massive fleets. However, the U.S. has shown the world how a single invisible platform loaded with 154 cruise missiles can devalue this entire investment and potentially reduce it to ashes. This strategic chess move in the South China Sea has rewritten the rules of the game. Washington, seeing Beijing's bluff, has painfully declared to the world how vulnerable China's most valuable assets are, even in its own backyard. Thank you for watching.